Welcome back to the Engineered Impact Podcast. I'm Dan Korth, and I'm here tonight to take a little public shaming. I have an accountability partner that I work with. I meet with him on a weekly basis, and we go over our goals for each week. And at the end of our sessions, we set targets for the coming week. Last week, we started doing something different where we also assigned a consequence to where if we failed to meet our targets for any given week, then we'd have to do whatever we'd selected as a consequence. So this was the first week. The consequence in my case was if I failed to hit my targets, I had to come on my podcast and publish an episode declaring I failed and sharing my thoughts on failure. So as you've already guessed, I failed. I did not meet all my targets. So here I am. The way I wanted to address the topic of failure with you is by sharing the single most epic financial failure I have ever experienced personally. Okay. So let me take you back to late 2010. I've been out of grad school for about 6-7 months at this point. As I've shared before, it was at that point that I really started looking at the money I'd saved up in my 401k, wanting to figure out how do I invest this money most efficiently and protect it so that I don't end up like the poor people I saw back in 2007, 2008, who were supposed to be retiring within a year or two and all of a sudden couldn't retire because the value of their 401ks had dropped almost 60%. Okay. I didn't want to be that guy. So I started learning. I started trying to figure out, how do I do this 401k thing better? Within about 6 months, I'd kind of started to come to the conclusion, I don't know that this 401k thing is going to be it at all. I don't know if this is ever going to get me there. So about that time, I started looking for alternatives, and I started kind of getting into politics, reading about economics. And at the time, in response to the Great Recession, the Federal Reserve was printing money like crazy. The government was, had been for years spending money like crazy, bailing out the banks and the automakers and, all of the people that were responsible for the crash in the first place. And so I started reading about things like hyperinflation and reading stories about, the Weimar Republic in post-World War I Germany and the hyperinflation they had there, and the pictures of people walking down the street with a wheelbarrow full of cash to buy a loaf of bread and all those things, right? And reading things about how that could very likely happen here because the Federal Reserve is printing money like they've never done before. And I learned that one of the ways that you can protect against that kind of scenario is through precious metals, okay, buying gold and silver. And so I started researching that a little bit because I thought, gosh, I wanted to take care of my family, right? I wanted to be able to prosper and protect my ability to not only take care of my family, but to have an impact in the world and to make a difference. And so I thought, well, shoot, I better pick up some of these precious metals, right? So I read a book and I learned how to do that, kind of figured out, what to buy and where to buy and things like that. And off I went with nothing but fear of hyperinflation and this one book that I read. And I had about $1,000 at the time. We were living in Southern California. It was really hard to save any money. But we scraped together about $1,000 and I went and I bought, I think it was like 31-ounce silver coins. And I waited a couple of weeks and they showed up in the mail and it was everything that I'd read about, right? They were big and they were shiny and beautiful and they felt heavy and real in my hand. And man, I felt smart, right? I was gonna beat the Fed at their own game. And when hyperinflation came, I was going to be able to feed my family and, prices of metals were going to go to the moon. I was going to walk out on the other side of this a rich man, right? So I was pretty happy with myself. I was feeling pretty smart. And I started thinking about it. I thought, gosh, spend $1,000 on these. If the price doubled, it's only $2,000. It's not very much money. And even if it went up like 10 or 20 times, like that's not, $10,000, $20,000. It sounds like a lot of money, but it's not that much money, right? I'm certainly not going to be rich at that point. I need some more of this stuff, right? So I started looking around and we were really only able to save a couple $100 a month at the time, which was only going to buy a handful of silver. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, gosh, this hyperinflation could happen any day. I gotta move fast, right? And certainly it's going to happen within the next year or two. And so it might not be the worst thing if I borrowed some money to do this. And so I started looking around at what options I had. And one day I got a letter in the mail from Discover It's a credit card company, and they were offering me a 0% balance transfer with no fee. So I looked at this and I thought, I knew a lot about credit cards at the time. And I realized if I pulled some shenanigans between a new Discover card and an existing card I had, I could get Discover, actually I could get Citi, to send me a $9,000 check with this new Discover card that I got. So I did that. I pulled some shenanigans, and a few weeks later, a $9,000 check shows up in the mail from Citibank. And I cashed that check, and I immediately went out and I bought $9,000 worth of silver. And I thought I was awesome. I was playing the game. I was an investor. I was going to beat everybody. I was going to walk away from this thing filthy rich. And what was going to make it even better is when the hyperinflation hit, it was going to turn the value of that $9,000 debt I'd just taken out into nothing. It was going to inflate away into nothing. I was never even going to have to pay it back. So then, as I'm patting myself on the shoulder and thinking, man, I'm awesome, I started looking around. Well, how can I get some more of this stuff, right? Because I just 10x'd my holdings. Now I've got, whatever. I've got $10,000 worth of silver. So start looking around. I thought, I've got all this money sitting in my 401k. And I found out you can take a loan from your 401k, Dan. So what did I do? I took a big loan, took a huge loan, and I put it all to work buying precious metals. And this time I had enough money. I bought 3 ounces of gold on top of all my silver. So now all this stuff shows up, and you got to understand that in the course of the 5 months that all this was going on, things were happening in the precious metals market that were validating my theory. Okay, it got to the point where, I started buying at $30 an ounce, but the next time I bought it was more like $35 an ounce, and it was like $42 an ounce, and it was getting to the point where, one of these transactions takes 1 to 2 weeks to go through, right? Where you send them a check and they wait for the funds to clear, and then they have to physically ship you the metal, obviously. So it's a 1 to 2 week turn time. And it was getting to the point where by the time the metal would show up, I was already sitting on a profit. It was already worth more than I bought it for. Okay. And so the price of the increases was accelerating as this was happening. And what I didn't realize, well, I realized at the time, prices were starting to go hyperbolic, meaning they were going higher really, really quickly, right? And being the super intelligent investor that I was at the time, I knew that that's good, right? When prices are going up, I'm winning. And this was just validating the story, right? That prices were going up because inflation was going up, because the Federal Reserve was printing money. And it all just reinforced what I was doing. And I was patting myself on the back, thrilled to death that I was setting myself up to be filthy rich, to be sitting on the right side of this wealth transfer when it happened, right? So this was going on, started December 2010. I bought my last silver on, I believe it was April 25th, 2011. Turns out that was the day that precious metal prices, silver prices in particular, peaked. Gold prices actually did continue to go up for a little bit, but silver prices peaked that day. I bought, the spot price of silver peaked at a little over $47 an ounce. With the premiums, I paid $53 an ounce for the last 10 ounces that I bought that day. And I sent off that $530 payment, and I sat back and was just congratulating myself on how awesome I was and how smart I was. Well, that was a Saturday, and when markets are closed on Saturday, obviously. So when the silver markets opened back up in Asia on Sunday, something interesting happened. The prices fell a lot. And like to the point that when Monday came, I was trying to figure out if I could cancel my payment or cancel my purchase, because it was worth a lot less than I just paid for it on Saturday. Turns out silver purchases are final. So like, well, all right, I was winning and winning and winning. I was bound to lose at some point. Well, it'll come back. Inflation, Federal Reserve's printing money. So that was April 2011. Silver prices finally bottomed at $12.45 an ounce 2 months ago in March. It was March 16th, 2020. So for 9 years, I had the precious privilege of learning about how to not be stupid, what it means to actually invest instead of to speculate, and to appreciate the fact that when asset prices are going hyperbolic, you do not buy. That was a huge failure. By the time we were done, everything in, every penny we'd been able to scrape together, saving for my paycheck, the balance transfer, the 401k loan, all in, we'd spent probably somewhere on the order of a third of my annual salary at the time. That hurt. And in addition to having 9 years to really learn and to take in the lessons from that experience, while prices crashed between 60 and 75% from what I'd paid for them, I also had several years where I had the privilege of paying Discover back because hyperinflation never came, and then paying back the 401k loan, which took even more years, which also was in non-depreciated dollars because the hyperinflation never came, or non-inflated dollars, I guess. But I learned some lessons from that failure. And the takeaway today is that while failure sucks, and while it hurts, and while you sometimes might lose a ton of money, you can learn from those things, right? And fortunately, I did learn that lesson. Unfortunately, I learned that lesson when I was 30 years old instead of 55 years old, right? Because I had a lot of time to recover and learn and incorporate that experience. Now, what was cool about it was in, I think it was 2018 when we had the last bull market in cryptocurrencies, okay? So I had some newsletters, and I'd been following kind of the cryptocurrency concept for a couple of years. I hadn't bought anything. But at the beginning of 2018, I was kind of starting to be sold on the idea that, this might be the wave of the future. And the idea was that, cryptocurrencies were just one manifestation of, I can't even think what the technology is called right now, but the underlying technology behind cryptocurrencies was going to fundamentally alter the way we did business and the way we lived and the way we voted and the way we did everything, right? Contract law and everything. Blockchain technology, that's the one. Blockchain technology was going to change everything, and cryptocurrencies were just one use of these things, right? But they were a sort of tangible use. They were something that you could buy and you could hold, and they went up and down in value. And it was getting to the point, more merchants were starting to accept Bitcoin for purchases. And the story went, as more and more businesses accepted cryptocurrencies, as people started to adopt them and use them, and it became more mainstream. And as other countries were falling apart because of their socialist policies, people were turning to cryptocurrencies to get out of their rapidly depreciating currencies and things like that. So kind of a similar story, right? The world's falling apart. This is the wave of the future. Prices are going to go crazy. And so around January, February 2018, I'm looking at these and I'm starting to take it seriously and think about it. And prices start to go up, and they started to go up a little bit faster and a little bit faster. And I'm starting to feel the emotions, right? Oh man, I might miss out. I should pull the trigger. Gosh, if I would have just bought last year when this guy first told me it, I'd already be up, 4x. And prices started going up. And at some point I stepped back and I thought, I have seen this movie before. I've seen this movie where there's a story, a compelling story, and prices are starting to skyrocket. I'm going to sit this one out. I'm going to wait and see what happens. And yes, I might miss out and I might kick myself next year, but I'm just going to wait because this looks awfully familiar. Well, prices went hyperbolic. I don't remember where it started. Bitcoin prices started in January, but by December of 2018, Bitcoin was worth 20 grand. Okay. Now we roll over the clock, 2019, get a week or two into that, and guess what? Somebody bought Bitcoin the day before it started to crash, and it crashed hard. Lost most of that value, right? So the good news, the bright, shiny silver lining, I guess, no pun intended, of my precious metals debacle and all of the tens of thousands of dollars that I lost and the 9 years that I had to sit and wait and appreciate those losses taught me some valuable lessons. They made me a smarter investor. And so when a similar situation happened, I was able to recognize this is not the time to be buying, right? I was able to step out of that. So as my penance today, I've shared with you why failure is such an important thing. failure is one of the best teachers that I've ever experienced because the pain that comes with failing really reinforces the lessons that we learn. And so you try something and you fail, and then you try something else, and you may succeed or you may fail. If you fail, you try something else, right? And it gets us to just keep trying until we hit success. And then we've learned all the things not to do. We've learned what we can do, and then we can take all of those lessons and apply them to other areas of our life. So that's what I got for you on failure. Scott, mission accomplished. I'll be back with you guys next time.